We should be able to go now. Let's back up to verse 20 and get my translation of it. We had a lot of notes we had on that. Are there any questions about demon possession? I think I sent you my file. I think I sent it to everybody. Were there any questions about that? Anyone? Okay.
No.
Of course, I don't believe in modern day demon possession. I hope no one thinks I did. That I do. Okay. All right. I'll leave the King James Version up there. I've got the American Standard on top too. And we'll start with Chris, if you would, Chris.
Yes. U duniste poterion curio penin kai poterion daemonion u duniste trepenezes curio met exin kai trapezes daemonion. And I have, y'all cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You all cannot be partakers of the table of the Lord and the table of devils / demons.
All right. Now, let me ask you here. This form is middle passive here. Which one do you think it is? Which one makes the most sense?
Middle.
Middle,
I think it is.
because it's a choice. You have to choose
Yeah.
one or the other.
Yeah.
Can't do them both.
I think it's middle voice. And so you cannot let of yourself do it for yourself drink. That doesn't fit the passive voice, see. Of the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons, see. So our problem is they were trying to mix together. You can't mix God's religion with any other religion. He just won't tolerate that. Thayer's definition, of course, demons is incorrect. We've already discussed that above. The cup of demons is a cup dedicated to demons when they feast in the idol's temple. That's the way I interpret it. The cup of demons. Any questions? That's genitive plural, see? Now, and you could say it's their cup or it's a cup relating to them. The genitive could be a possessive case or it could be relationship. The Church of Christ could be Christ's church, he owns it, or it could be related to him, linked with him. And there's an overlapping in the meaning of the two. And you can argue both ways. I think give scripture that both are true. So I think it's used in a relationship in Hebrews 12 chapter. The church of the firstborn is, the firstborn is plural. And you can tell that from English without a Greek text, because if you look at the verbs in English, they're plural verbs. And so who are, see, the word are is plural. So it's, and so we can say it is our church in the sense that we're part of it, but not that we own it, not that we possess it. So and English would allow that. So I think the Greek would too. Any questions or comments? I don't want anybody to think I'm saying I own the church, but I'm part of it, see. When they feasted in the idol's temple, I believe that they had gone too far. I think. But when they went to the home of a pagan and ate with him, that wasn't wrong. And so there's a difference.
Unless he said he was worshiping.
Yeah. And if he said that this is offered in sacrifice to idols, and you don't eat it, you can eat the other vegetables that he's serving. Okay. Does that make sense? So to partake, now meteko, or metekain, this word here needs to be studied a little more thoroughly, I believe. there's a relationship partakers with the table, and this is the table of the Lord and the table of demons. Of course, Chi links two things that are equal in rank, or equal. And I have another quote on Chi in other passages. I quote more than one source to give more information that someone might have it and go through and find it. But it does link things that are equal. Like repent and be baptized are both equal. Chi. Believe in, he that believeth and is baptized, belief and baptism are equal. So they're of equal rank. So I take this by use of Chi that they're equating and putting these two on equal rank. And you can't put God's table, the Lord's table, on equal rank with the table of demons because of Chi. That's my interpretation. Any questions or comments? All right. Let's go to verse 22. James, could you do that one?
Yes, sir.
In the last class, we kept losing our mic. The mic kept knocking out. And so I don't know. Hopefully it won't happen here, but we'll try it. It hasn't happened yet, so we seem to be okay. Okay? Go ahead and read if you would.
All right. Parazelaman ton kurion me iskuroteroi autu esman. And verse 21 I translated as, or are we provoking the Lord? We're not stronger than him.
Are we provoking the Lord? Okay. Are we stronger than him? Now, look at this form. We have may here, and I want us to, we have Esmond. All right, and I want you to look at this. We provoke the Lord to jealousy. God has provoked jealousy by their actions. Deuteronomy 32, 16 to 21 talks about it. Are we stronger than he? Are we stronger than God? Now, I want you to look at what I've highlighted here. I'm going to lay it out here. We have may. The problem is that if I put this with my mouse, okay, my mouse puts something about, covers it up. In questions, may or may implies that the expected answer is what?
No.
So we're not stronger than he is, are we? That would be how I would translate it. It's a rhetorical question that expects a no answer. You're not stronger than God, are you? Not stronger than the Lord, right? If we were to presume to incite God to anger or jealousy, he must be presumed to be more powerful than God because there are consequences to that. And I think that's kind of subtle in the background of it. No one's more powerful than God, so we don't want to presume to violate God's will. We can't do that. We can't make God jealous in a sense of who would be jealous. Worshiping a false God or putting them equal to him. That follows because we would have to be more powerful than God in order not to suffer the consequence of provoking God to anger or jealousy. So we're not, and so I translated, or do we provoke the Lord to jealousy? We are not stronger than he is, are we? That's how I translated it.
I actually changed it a little bit. I put, we provoke the Lord to jealousy, do we not? Are we more powerful than he? So, because it was present tense, and so I thought it was just a statement that that's what's going to happen if you try to do both. Demons and God, we will provoke the Lord to jealousy.
Well, I kind of went with the opinion of the compilers of the text, and so you've got an argument to make there, and it's a good argument. It could be what you're saying, Jerry, But notice I highlighted it, that semicolon is a question mark. Compilers of the text thought it was a question. But again, that's debatable, okay, whether it's a question or not.
Well, that's why I put do we not at the end. So, because it is, to me, it's a statement that we are provoking the Lord, and you know that, don't you? It's essentially.
Well, we can have a rhetorical question without the markers.
Yeah.
May is the marker expecting a no answer right here. I'll highlight
Mhm.
May. But ooh would be a marker to highlight a yes answer. So if you had an ooh in there, you would absolutely be true for certain. But those markers do not have to be there for it to be a rhetorical question. So you still could be right. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, and because I did make the last half of that the rhetorical question, but not the first.
So you're saying it's really.
Well, I actually did it both ways because I caveated here.
Yeah, you're treating it like two rhetorical questions, one after the other.
Yes.
And there's no reason that we can say that you're wrong. Okay. I don't think we can say you're wrong.
I just thought that was the reason he's saying you do not have the power to do that because this is what will happen. And so I was trying to make it have that.
Well,
addressed.
American Standard and King James on the top there, you notice they both treat it as a question. Again, that's the opinion of the translators. Keep that in mind. And you of course translated it as a question also. But
statement, a question definitely requiring
yes answer.
a yes answer. In the first case.
Okay. Well, I don't think we can be ironclad about whether you're right or wrong.
I did it both
your
ways.
Translation makes sense.
I did it both ways. I just wanted to check with you and see if that made sense or not.
All right, let's go on. Now we're going to make applications. Getting pretty close to chapter 11, which is going to be it's going to take some time. Now, remember, fellas, we won't have class next week. Okay, so be aware of that. Okay. Either Monday night or Tuesday night classes, neither of those we'll have neither one of those next week. All right. That's Shane, could you read for us? Jerry has vision problems, and if you can read for him, he'll interpret and do the translation.
Panta moi existen al u panta sum ferai panta moi existen al u panta oko domai.
Okay, and I put, well, this one I did it more than one way too. Okay, I'm going to give it the way I think it is, but it's not the normal. Okay. And so I probably did this wrong, but of all things being lawful to me, not all things are expedient. All things being lawful to me, but not all things spiritually edify. I added spiritually. Because I think it's usually all things are lawful, but that's not true. That's not even a true statement. But all things being lawful to me, they're not all expedient. And so all things lawful is not a true statement. But all those things that are lawful, some are those things are not expedient, and some aren't spiritually edifying. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Now I'm trying to, I don't know exactly how to say that. But
this verse has to be really looked at carefully, because the word all is always limited by context. Right?
Yeah, and I tried to make the context, I tried to make it so that the context made sense. So
I've been in a class in college, for example, where they said all the students passed this test. They didn't mean all the students on the campus, it meant all the students in that class, in that particular section of the class even passed this test. And so all is limited by the context. Now, here is The word lawful is, it is lawful, or it is ex, and it's estin, ex estin, which is from ame. And so it's from the unused ex ame. And notice right here, I'll move my mouse over and move it around a bit. You can see what I'm looking at here. And for me, the word all must be defined by the context. It refers to the eating of meats that have been sacrificed to idols in the context. I think that's what it's limited to right there. He's not saying that you can go out and shoot up drugs and rob banks and stuff like that, right? It's defined by the context. It refers to eating meats been sacrificed to idols. It seems to be the slogan of some who have a libertine attitude in their thinking, though. But I want you to notice here, this is Allah. And I want you to read with me in the middle of the screen what rung says it means. Although there are several contrastive and adversative particles, Allah. Now I would contrast that with they, delta epsilon, they, and they both mean but. Allah adds a unique constraint. Unique is kind of different. It's one of a kind of correcting some aspect of what precedes. In terms of distinction Allah from ame, if not, see, ame would be if not, with my mouse over ame. The key is the relation to what follows the particle and to what precedes. So it relates to what follows to what precedes. In the case of ame, the exempted element that replaces what precedes was a potential member of the negated set. They're in the same category. In the case of Allah, the correcting member is not a member of the original set, it's a new element, something different. Now, he was not a good man, but he was a bad man. Good and bad are in different categories, different sets. Does that make sense? I just use that as an illustration, not for here, but just illustrated. So right here, he's talking about all things are lawful, and I think in context, it's eating meat sacrificed to idols. Might have been a slogan of some in the church, saying, well, I think those meats are lawful, therefore other things are lawful too, not necessarily. You've shown that they're lawful. So I can go to the pagan temple and I can eat that meat. Well, maybe I can just consort with the temple prostitutes. No, I can't hardly do that. See? Right? All things are expedient, but not all things are expedient. Now then, let me point out, I hear people throw around, well, it's expedient, and this is an expedient, and that is an expedient. It can't be expedient if it's not lawful first. It won't be expedient to consort with the temple prostitutes. It won't be expedient to go into the pagan temple and eat the meats in the pagan temple. See, they can eat those meats in their home, but that's different because you're not necessarily worshiping unless they tell you this is sacrificed to idols, in which case you don't eat it, see, because they're making it part of an act of worship. That's fine. But we can't worship with them, see, in their pagan way, for sure. Any question? Paul is setting forth the truth that even lawful activities are limited by the question of whether or not they're expedient. So when we see something that's lawful, we still have to ask, is it helpful? Is it expedient? So our freedom is limited. There's a limit on our freedoms. First of all, we're limited to doing what is lawful. Okay? And so we found we can only do what's lawful, but we can't do even something that's lawful if it's not expedient, if it doesn't help the cause. Is it lawful? Would it be lawful for the elders of the church to have the assembly on 2 o'clock in the morning on Sunday morning?
Sure.
It would be lawful, but would it be expedient?
Possibly, but not normally.
Not normally, it wouldn't be expedient, not normally. Now, if we were under persecution and we had to do it for the sake of secrecy, that might be expedient. But it certainly would not be expedient right now in America because there'd be it'd be such a hardship on people with little children to bring them to worship. And some people come at night, and there'd just be some problems with it. And it would be a lawful thing to do, but it wouldn't be expedient. So it doesn't help. It's not helpful. It doesn't expedite things. Then he says all things are lawful, but not all things what? They don't edify. So first of all, we don't do it if it's not lawful. Second, even if it's lawful, it has to be helpful for the cause of Christ. And then last, it has to what?
Edify.
It has to edify.
Build up the church.
So we see three things. It has to first be lawful. And if it's lawful, it has to be expedient. It has to be helpful. But you can't even talk about it whether it's expedient unless you first prove it's lawful. You got the cart before the horse. So some people say, well, that's an expedient. When they introduced instrumental music in the church in the late 19th century, began to introduce it, it's an expedient. Well, they have to prove it's lawful to prove it's an expedient. All right. Any questions or comments? But all things don't edify. See, they don't edify. And of course, that's an interesting word. It's oiko, and I'll break it. Oiko, and that's from oikos, a house, and domeo or dome, domeo is the house. And our word domicile or domestic all comes from that word. In Russian, the word for house is dom. My dome is my house in Russian. And the Russians got a lot of their words from Greek because of the influence of the Greek Bible in the Eastern Orthodox Church. Does that make sense? So they picked up a lot of words. Paul is setting forth the truth that even lawful things are limited by the question of whether or not they edify and whether or not they're expedient. So we got, if we prove it's lawful, we still got to say what it's going to help. It's going to be helpful. It's going to not hinder or harm, and it's going to expedite things, make things help work better. And then we got to say it edifies, it builds up. The Barnes congregation decided because of COVID and other problems that we would have, instead of having a Sunday night assembly, we have a Sunday morning Bible class and an assembly, and we break and we have a meal together, and then we eat. At 1 o'clock we have our evening worship, and so instead of having 5 o'clock, people can come and they stay and we eat. We all bring our own food. We eat, and we get together and we have our second assembly, and that works much better than having breaking and going home to our houses. But we found that be very helpful because we got more and more people here. All right.
And in fact, some of our older members live a long ways away.
Yeah, we have some that live 40 miles away and drive to the assembly. And about maybe 38 or 39 miles, something like that. Around 40. But that helped us. Second thing that limits our freedom is what is lawful is it must edify. So we ask, first of all, is it lawful? And if it's not lawful, we don't even worry about whether it's expedient or whether or not it's edifies. If something is lawful, we've already seen another limitation on it in 1 Corinthians 6:12. Is it enslaving to us? So now we got three questions. We want to ask if something's lawful. Is it lawful? Well, then we can say, well, is it expedient? Well, if it's expedient, does it edify? And last of all, does it enslave us? So we ask a series of questions before we do something. Any comments or questions? All right. That's my explanation of the passage. Any questions or comments?
So it's best to do it with that all things are lawful, with the understanding that it's qualified, rather than trying to actually word it so that it says that, like, of all things being lawful to me, not all things are expedient.
Well, I think in that context, he's just talking
Just
about.
stay within the
eating meats
context.
In the context.
But there was even a caveat to that, because you can't have things that, you can't even eat the meat if in fact somebody still says that it's, if they think they're worshiping when they eat it, then you still can't do it. even
But
if
he's
it's
already
legal.
forbidden us to do that, though. It's not lawful. We just don't do it. We just back off from it. Not because we think the meat is going to. This might be an application of whether or not it edifies or it's expedient. Why? Because we know the meat is just meat, but he thinks that pagan person that we went to eat with in his house, he thinks that he's worshiping the idol, and if I partake with him, then I've lost my influence or ability to influence him.
Then you might have some members who aren't quite educated enough yet who might think that too.
Yeah. So it might not edify
Their
them.
conscience would be.
See, so that's where these would come into play. Any questions? All right, and get back to Chris.
Okay, verse 24. Medes tu itu zeteo Allah to tu etiru eschatos. Have let no one seek his own, but that which is another's, or let no one seek their own good, but the good of others.
Okay. See, now problem with our English here, we could easily misunderstand this. And let me point out here, what mood is the word seek in Greek?
See, I didn't write that down. Oh, asking permission is how people see that.
Present tense.
Imperative.
It's imperative mood.
Yes, imperative.
It's that third person imperative that Greek has that English doesn't have, and they try to translate it with the word let. That's about as good as they can do. And some take it as permission, and it's not giving you permission to seek his own. He said, he's commanding them, let no man seek his own, say. Right.
Would you put that, let no one just seek their own good, but also the good of others? Or is this not seek your own way at all?
Allah is in an opposite category, it's a different category than other neighbor's good, with the word but.
So in this case, in the context, it's don't be looking after what's good, what you think is good for you, but put that aside and just look at what's good for your brother.
That's right. And you put it back a few verses, 2 or 3 verses back, you have him not eating that meat. Well, I know I can eat it. I know I want to seek my own. I'm going to have my own way. I'm going to do what's going to be for the salvation of the most souls.
Hopefully they'll coincide, and you'll be able to seek after your own thing and after their own thing at the same time. But sometimes it does take some education to make that happen.
But that's how I view this. Are there any, James, you got anything, or Shane, any comments to add there?
No, sir.
No, sir. The discussion's been good, though.
Okay. So let no man seek his own, his own. And again, that's a neuter article. Might logically be seeking of good things for himself, spiritual growth, etc. But this is not reasonable, say. It might logically be forbidding the seeking of evil things, but this is quite unreasonable because we are forbidden throughout the scriptures to seek anything that's evil. So I think he's seeking neutral things, and this is our rights to eat meat sacrificed to idols. In the context, you have to keep it in the immediate context. And I think that's what he has to be talking about. Then he says, but that's Allah, that's that word we had, and I put this definition we read earlier in here, and it's a strong adversative conjunction, but it puts it in a completely different category. John was good and Bill was evil. See, but Bill was evil, and that would be Allah. That you'd use Allah if you're writing in Greek.
Like King James has another one's wealth, so that seems to, let no one seek his own, but every man another's wealth. So on this case, of course, it's italicized, maybe another's spiritual well-being.
Could be, or his edification, or his, might be put into those other words in the context.
I just put his own thing because it can be lots of different things like that.
Now, the neighbor, I want you to notice here, the American Standard says neighbor. Does King James say neighbor too? Another's. Another's is King James. It's a more accurate translation than the American Standard. Because this is heteros, all right? And that's another one of a different nature. Glacion is an adverb translated neighbor. It's on the middle of the screen, right in the middle of the screen, right where my mouse is.
Would you say this is not a Christian, or would this be strong Christian versus weak Christian?
Well,
Yes.
I'm taking that
it
as,
might be both, but
okay.
they're different in some way.
Okay.
Certainly could fit. You could make a case for either one, and maybe even both,
Okay.
from the context.
Or we say different in their view about eating meat sacrificed to idols. To be
Yes, I
specific.
think it's still talking about that meat sacrificed to idol, and anything that would be like it.
So one man's nature allows him to eat it with a clear conscience, and another man's nature thinks he's worshiping an idol, and that would be maybe the two natures.
Yeah, and we got this in Romans 14 when we went through Romans. We saw that too. Same principle. Romans chapter 14.
So we've had that issue in the church not too long ago. It was a big thing whenever went through the brotherhood that if you purchased food from a grocery store owned by a false religion, that you were supporting that false religion, and therefore you cannot do it. And that's exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Yes, you can do it because you're not worshiping
Yeah.
that. And there's absolutely no difference in buying meat in the marketplace that had been a part of a sacrifice to an idol, but it's now just being sold.
I dare say there's not much we couldn't buy. That we could buy. There's not much that we could buy that the corporation that produces it is not owned partly by some false religion. The Roman Catholics and other groups have put a lot of money into various companies. Mormons, and so that, I think that's the principle that Jerry's talking about. The neighbor is one of a different nature, probably the weaker brother, I said, but it might be that pagan as well. And I think I would revise my notes there and say.
Yeah, the one that said
and/or
this
the
has
pagan,
been
and/or
offered
the
to
pagan.
idols.
Okay.
Okay.
Do not seek to cause the neighbor, the weaker brother, or the pagan to stumble. Whatever object one is to seek, and that's good, or wealth is elliptical, and American Standard, whatever it is. Here's how I rendered it. That no man seek his own rights to act in realms of liberty, and I put that in italics. That's a bunch of explanation, a bunch of adding to the text, but each his neighbor's rights to act in realms of liberty. That's adding a bunch of italicized words to the text. Maybe I'm taking too much liberty there, okay? Any question? I think I will modify this up here and say weaker brother and or the pagan. Put that here, both of those, okay?
Because one you're edifying and the other one you're trying to reach.
Yes. And so in principle, it's not expedient to do that with him. Doesn't expedite, doesn't help the cause of Christ, see? So we want to expedite the cause of converting people. I think our love for the lost is the reason we go out and teach the lost. If it's not for that reason, we need to change our attitude. Now, let's go to verse 25, if we can. And I forgot who read last.
I had that one.
You read last?
Yeah, that was me.
James, can you read verse 25, please?
Yes, sir. Pantoen makelo polumenon estheata meden anakrinontes diatein sune desin. And I translated that as follows. Eat all that is being sold in the meat market, no one examining the meat on account of the conscience.
Okay. But in the meat market, it's translated shambles, but that's kind of the word shambles. You have to look it up in the dictionary to figure out what it means. But meat market is accurate translation. I like that. Okay. All right. Any questions? And I have it on the screen up here. Several sources. Thayer and Bauer, Art and Gingrich, both of them have them cited up here. You go ahead and eat it. That's imperative. It's second person imperative. You eat it. All right. Now, what he's saying is the present imperative in the middle of the screen, Powers tells us, indicates that an action expressed, the verb is ongoing, continued or repeated. The aorist imperative implies that the action expressed is not ongoing, continued or repeated. The aorist imperative is the one that is normally used unless there's some reason to indicate derivative action. That's what Powers thinks. Other authorities claim the same thing. Now, if that's the case, he's stressing derivative action by choosing the present imperative when the aorist imperative was the norm. Does that make sense? That's what they're telling us. So you keep on eating it. You continue to eat it. I've given you permission. You can go ahead and keep eating it. But of course, you don't become a stumbling block, as we've already set forth back in the prior verses.
But the
That takes us to
judging,
verse 23. Go ahead.
but the judging is a present active, so wouldn't that be saying stop judging concerning the conscience? I mean, they're doing it, and that's something that's ongoing, and they need to stop it.
Well, let's look at the asking of a question. We'll get to this in just a minute. Asking a question, that's a participle. And quit.
I just use judging instead of questioning.
Well, it's the idea of looking through a series of objects, particulars to distinguish or search after, scrutinize it. I think they were all getting upset about this. What can we do? It's like you were talking about buying from a grocery store that's owned by some false religion owns interest in the grocery store. I think we had some brethren trying to figure this out. I remember years ago, about 25 or 30 years ago, I knew some preachers that decided that we couldn't pay taxes because they were performing abortions with the money and doing some other stuff. And I could see how they thought this, but I think if you go back in principle, the church paid their taxes, even though the money was being given by the government, the Roman government, to the pagan temples. But they paid their taxes anyhow, and the Lord told them to.
And being used.
Yes. Someone got a question? So, well, we've got a principle there, and it's asking no question for conscience sake. Right? The limitation of conscience will be set forth in the following verses. Now, he's going to place limitations on your conscience. So he's going to do this, and we'll have about another 5 minutes or so, maybe one more verse. I translated everything sold in the meat market, asking no question. Eat everything sold in the meat market, asking no question for conscience sake. Okay? And I think he's going back to any principle. He talks about eating the meat in the pagan temple. Don't do that because they'll misunderstand. And you'll be engaging in worship with them. Don't eat the meat if you go to a pagan person's house to eat a meal with him. If he tells you it's sacrificed to idols, because they interpret that to be worship and eat when you eat it. And so you don't do that. Now he lays out, what about just buying the meat? Can I buy the meat and eat it at my own home? See, I think we have three different situations here laid out for us. That's how I view it. Any questions or comments? Shane, James, you got any comments there? Any thoughts on that?
No, sir.
Oh, I just, I went with examining instead of questioning, but they're both relatively the same kind of concept.
Okay.
I actually reworded it just a little bit too, saying anything sold in the marketplace you may, and I added you may eat. With no, well, I changed judging to questioning, or no asking, or asking no question.
Well, I mean, the way you translated, you fellas, are not necessarily wrong. I mean, these words can
Well, I
carry
just
that through.
rearranged them just a little bit.
All right, let's look at verse 26. I think we can do it. We want to go to about 10 more minutes. If we can get 2 verses, that'd be good. I forgot who read last week. James, was it you?
James did.
Shane, can you read this for us? And Jerry will translate for us.
All right. To Gar Kuriu, Hege Kai, to Paroma Ates.
And I put, for of the Lord is the earth and the full abundance of it.
Okay. Gar always gonna give you the reason for what he said in the prior statement or what's been happened or said. So now he said the earth is the Lord's and the fullness. If it's the Lord's and we're his children, can't we partake of it? See? Because it's his, it's our father's property. Okay. However, the fullness of the earth is his. Everything on earth belongs to God, therefore everything on earth can be used by God's children. But God's children must use some things in moderation. Don't do anything that's enslaving, such as marijuana and so forth. We can use drugs, we can even use marijuana for medicinal purposes. There's some things in it that could be used for medicine. Alcohol could be used for medicine, but not for other purposes, I don't believe, okay? And we see this, looks like almost a quote of Psalm 24, verse 1, right? That seems to be, that's what he's quoting, or he's at least alluding to it. Here's some other passages, and let me put my mouse up here and highlight them. You can see what I'm talking about. Passages that say essentially the same thing. So we still ask the question, is it lawful? And there's some things that are in the earth that are not lawful. I don't think it'd be wise to do. Although I wouldn't say it would be wrong to even get hooked on heroin or opium. Because when someone's got real bad cancer and the pain is terrible, we might use an opiate to deaden the pain. Right? Now, we'll start with verse 27 next week.
2 weeks.
2 weeks from now. 2 weeks from now. Thank you. Right?
On that one, I put, for of the Lord is the earth and the full abundance of it, because I thought it was saying, because the earth, God, the Lord provided the earth and everything in it, is what I thought it was saying. And tried to say that in some way.
Well, the word earth is not genitive case, it's the Lord. Okay. And that's why I went with my translation.
Oh,
on the
okay.
screen. Okay. All right, I'm gonna stop the recording.